Well, welcome back to the WebEx series with CBT on smart machines. My name is David Rauch, and I'm with Rockwell Automation. And today I'm going to have two individuals with me that were with me last month. Would be Jeff Waters with Rockwell Automation and Dave Jennings with CBT. Before we get started in this final month of this series, I'd like to kind of give you just a little bit of a refresher of what we talked about when we first got together. If you remember the first month, we tried to just do a little definition of the Internet of Things and what they are, and the Internet of Things and how it kind of relates to our real life, such as in a home, right? Where people have taken the homes, they've put cameras, they've put, smart doorbells, they have sensors on their thermostats to know what the temperature is. The smoke detector was another one I talked about, where people are doing these things to their homes so they can gather information about their homes and know what's going on, even if they're not there. Well, that's, very much like a smart machine. The next thing that we talked about is, what is a smart machine? It's taking a piece of equipment and getting all these sensors, which is kind of the foundation of this, and getting all this real-time data, contextualizing it, doing some analytics on it so we can do some predictive maintenance or prescriptive things so we can optimize this piece of equipment. And then we talked about why do we want to build these smart machines? We want to add value. And isn't that really what we want to do in the end anyways? We want to differentiate ourselves with our customers. But we want to add value, whether it be by mobility devices or doing condition monitoring or, looking at all these sensors and just taking that piece of equipment to the next level. Or we might want to reduce costs, whether it be in modular code, virtual design, or, even integrating safety can help reduce cost. And as far as safety goes, we want to reduce risk. And with either safety or, intellectual property protection or tamper protection. And then there's also the new revenue streams that we can get with smart equipment, whether it be, information and reports or remote access or hardware licensing. There's just a lot of different reasons that we want to build smart machines. Well, if you remember last month, we got together again and we took it the next step. We wanted to talk about OEE. And Jeff described to us what OEE is. It's overall equipment effectiveness. We talked about 4 pillars that support OEE. One of them was reducing downtime. Another one was increasing throughput. Then there is improving safety. There's that safety again. And then the fourth one was reducing operational costs. But we did not talk about reducing operational costs because we wanted to save that for this month when we're talking about Show Me the Money. And we're going to talk today about reducing operational costs and then also additional revenue streams. So before I invite Jeff and Dave back, I would like to remind everybody, please book a meeting. Because I'm telling you, CBT can really help you if you want to get into developing your equipment to be a smarter piece of equipment. They have experience in this, and they can call either Jeff or myself or other talent from Rockwell, where we can help them and help you to develop your machine to be a smarter machine. So at this time, I'd like to reintroduce to you Jeff Waters with Rockwell Automation and Dave Jennings with CBT. So Dave and Jeff, what can you tell us about Show Me the Money?
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that kickoff, David, and that really is the point today. Is going to be looking at focusing on how we can take what we've talked about so far and setting that framework of data on equipment, talking about what some of the use cases then might be, and then now really starting to look at it as to the why. What is the financial impact of doing these? I think as we build this out, you'll think about it kind of in the backwards order as you start to look at this of how you do it to your machine, right? The financial becomes the why. And really what we've talked about so far is the how. And so today,
Exactly.
I think we want to focus on some of the reasons of why you do these kinds of smart machines, why you take on adding intelligence to the equipment and start looking at things like OEE. And so we'll get into, I guess, 2 parts of that of internally reducing that operating cost. What are ways that we can leverage these technologies and these tools that help reduce the internal labor, the internal operations and efficiencies that we can be addressed. But additionally, how do we then convert that into sales revenue? How do we convert that into increase in market share, increase in service contracts? We'll go through a variety of those.
Yep. Jeff and I are going to kind of just have a conversation about that. Not specifically into the technical details of that, but you can always contact us after this. Hopefully this will just get some ideas going. It's kind of the thought process of just kind of what is available, what's out there that you can do. So let's go ahead and kick that off if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a great point to start with because it really is an examination of what are some of the significant impacts addressing these areas of focus can have, right? How does improving operational efficiency impact the customer's bottom line, right? These can be not just internal OEM impact, but these can be end user impacts. So when we get into talking about what's the operational efficiency of an end operator, how can I impact third line or third shift operators at my customer? Does that make me more marketable and more valuable to the customer? So how do we start converting those into operational benefits to my customer and ultimately back into revenue in my pocket as an OEM?
Yeah, and I like kind of the topic of this particular slide that we're looking at here, talking about the impact of digital transformation. If you look at the way machines and really just the whole entire plant processes have been occurring since the first digital revolution, I guess it would be the conversion of mechanical processes over to electrical processes. Initially, when you designed a machine to get rid of some of those mechanical process and go to electrical, that was the intent of the machine, was just to duplicate whatever mechanical process was being done. And that was kind of the idea of upgrade or migration, was to just take something that was mechanical and replace it with some new technology. Now what we're getting is we can take that technology that's now even smarter with the devices that we can put in there. We talked about in some of the earlier seminars, the new sensors, the new processors that are capable of handling so much data. Now we can take that new digital equipment and actually take the data from it and do more things with that data. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. It's just the advances in data technology that we can do.
Yeah, and I think from here on that, looking at what's the challenge or the business impact that I want to drive, this is, as an OEM, the areas we need to focus on. Are there specific things or areas of focus our customers are asking for? You know, is there something that a competitor's doing that we aren't? Is there something that our customers are missing that we can provide? These are opportunities for us to help solve those problems for our customer. This here just showing some of the quick impacts that we're seeing addressing some of these challenges, right? How do we help our customers reduce their maintenance costs? So in there you see high maintenance or high material and inventory costs. If we can help reduce that material cost, what does that do to our customer's bottom line? For workforce, this could even be internal, seeing a reduction in how long it takes to onboard a new employee, a new field tech. What are different ways that we can start to address some of the challenges that we're seeing? It can and is having significant impact on the industry today.
Yeah, and since you were mentioning kind of what we're looking at here, the idea of this entire presentation was not to just go through a bunch of slides and kind of regurgitate what the slide is saying. Kind of wanted you to look at the slide during the seminar, but then we're just going to have a general conversation about what is on those slides. We wanted to try to present actual use cases, which is where the numbers that these things come from, that you see actual benefits from using these technologies. So it's kind of where we wanted to go with this.
I think that sets up, if you go ahead one slide, that's exactly kind of taking this approach of what are different ways to tackle a use case, or what are some clear business cases that we're seeing customers attach to, leverage as priority use cases. I've been working with a lot of OEMs and machine builders recently around these topics, and in a lot of cases it's tell me what I should be doing. Tell me what people in the industry are doing. I need some direction. And these are some areas that we're seeing, right, people adopt and take on. I don't know if you've got some examples of customers that you're working with on how they can operationalize some of these technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. A good one is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, talking about being able to take the information that we get from sensors and the capabilities of the new processors, like, for instance, the performance that we have in some of the new higher level controllers that can do calculations. So we talked about OEE in the last presentation. We kind of went in depth about what OEE is and why you would want to use it. So for this one, you could just say that you could do that OEE on a machine level basis. So you put your equipment in, you can show the end user or your field staff or whoever is going to need to use that data, exactly what's going on with your machine at the time that they need to use it. And that's what's important. If what I've seen a lot are kind of performance graphs and things like that are hanging up on a board. So it could be hanging up on this whiteboard, for instance. They could be a month behind. So you could see performance, you could see dipping performance, whatever. If that's a month behind, you're already a month too late. So the idea is to get that information right at the machine for the operators to use. That's the biggest change that I've seen as far as the OEMs that I've been working with, are the idea to get that information into the equipment's HMI and get it right into the operator's hands at the time that they're making the product or using that machine to package the product or whatever they're doing.
And that's, I think the idea of the reports is a great one that we hear a lot of OEMs trying to tackle right out of the gate, right? I want to be able to provide a dashboard to my customer. I want to provide reporting capability. That is where I think my customer is going to pay, for those reports, right? If I could get them some kind of service subscription, some kind of agreement that I'm providing them monthly reports on the health of my assets, the health of my machines, the throughput, but it's identifying who those reports need to go to. We can create ones that are operator specific, so the operator knows how they're doing for the day. We can create maintenance specific ones that go to maintenance management and maintenance teams so they can see what's being done. There's a lot of ways to start doing these reports, and the ultimate comeback is we have to identify why and who. So who's going to benefit from having these reports, and can we target a specific use case, right? Is it the issues the customer's maintenance team doesn't always follow through on the predictive maintenance or the preventative maintenance that we recommend? And can we take that data, collate it, and let somebody who can have authority see that they need to be more proactive about enforcing these maintenance procedures so that our machines can continue to run? And then does that report allow us to start providing them with a subscription model to say, we can provide you these reports. These give you more information about the usefulness of the machine, how it's being leveraged, whether procedures are being followed. And we're finding a lot more adoption of those types of targeted reporting models at customers to give them exactly what the person wants to see, especially around who's signing off on buying those reports.
Yeah, and that's another feature that you could implement into the design of the machine. So you could note, as you're designing the machine, what types of information you would get out of this machine, so you can design those reports around that, and possibly even the operational aspects of the machine, like setup parameters and things like that, speeds and positions, everything like that could be done as a report. So you could get that information as to, was this set up as it is recommended, or is the setup constantly changing where they're going in and changing things? They can never really dial in to a specific configuration. That actually happened a lot in my experience in the field, was that when you have a setup and the product is running and you keep trying to change the configuration, tweak it a little bit here or there, you never really get the product dialed in, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So if you can take some reports, they don't even have to be monthly reports. They could be on-demand reports. You could go into your HMI or some other form or way to get these reports, and you can see what the configuration was, when it changed, possibly even who changed it, and any number of information that might be valuable to get out of the machine.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point. The other area I think we wanted to focus and talk about is that reducing operational costs. And in a lot of cases, what we're seeing today of having this data available is how we reduce our services or maintenance staffs as we go and support our machines. Whether it's how do we reduce warranty, so because going and supporting warranty equipment's 100% cost on us as OEMs. So we have to, how do we find ways to reduce that? Is it collecting that data to see when something's actually wrong? Is it getting a better idea of what's happening on site before we go out there? So when we show up, it's with the right parts, it's with the right people. In my background as a field engineer, there's a lot of times that I was called in to service or work on something only to find out upon arriving that there wasn't a clear understanding of what the issue was. There wasn't, the right identification of who should have been involved. And, you end up now being not the appropriate person. You're not there with the right parts or tools. And so this drags out the length of time that the system's down. It drags out it increases the cost associated with supporting that repair, because now I'm just dragging out getting the next person in, getting the next part in. And again, if that's under warranty or if that's part of an agreement, that's all cost to us as the OEM. So what are some ways we can start to leverage these tools to either support remotely, support just in time, so seeing, because we're collecting data, we know that something needs to be serviced as opposed to a downtime where we're scrambling. So there's a lot of ways to really start to leverage and optimize that.
Yeah, that's a good kind of segue into the two parts that we're talking about. They're really, as far as what we're talking about for either operational costs or revenue generation, there's kind of the two thoughts of looking at that. It's the design of the machine. What can you get out of data to make your machine optimized, more efficient? That goes to the design. Then you look at the service aspect of it. And I think that's a nice key for a good revenue stream, either the remote support in general, or even offering some kind of a performance guarantee based on the fact that you have remote connectivity to your equipment. You can see that all of the maintenance is being done according to what is prescribed, and you are getting that data returned to you as an OEM to confirm that. So that could be an additional revenue stream to offer as either possibly a lease of the equipment and guarantee the performance of the equipment, or just savings, like you mentioned, in the reduction of having to send maintenance techs in the field to troubleshoot that.
Well, I think the other interesting piece that we're starting to see too with these newer technologies, and this isn't so much having data, but having access to the digital technologies, a digital twin of your system, that we're starting to really see the way to be more efficient in onboarding new talent. So if you have field techs or you have high turnover of your engineers, how do we bring a new person up to speed quicker and make them, they're not going to be as impactful as that expert that just left, or that person who had 30 years of experience before they retired. But how do we capture some of that knowledge before it leaves and allow that new hire to have at least the ability to call it up and see it, the ability to call up and understand how a work procedure might work and improve the onboarding experience for somebody like that. I'm working with a customer right now where we're trying to leverage these tools to take their onboarding of new field techs from 6 months to 4 months. So they have an extensive field tech organization within the U.S., and every new tech that comes on board onboards for 6 months of OJT, on-the-job training, shadowing, classroom training, and that's 6 months that they're non-revenue generating for that OEM. So leveraging some of these new tools of a digital twin to practice and train on, augmented reality tools to start to see what the overlay of an on-demand video training could be while I'm in front of the machine to work on it. Does this allow them to get a field tech out solo calls, at 4 months instead of 6 months? And then you can start to do what's the justification of that 2 month savings.
Yeah. Also, if you look at it from the end user perspective, not necessarily the OEM onboarding perspective, but the end user perspective, they might not need to have as highly trained of a staff if the OEM can provide the maintenance remotely, or even augmented reality or anything like that could also be used from an end user perspective, which would also add to the OEM's income stream.
That's actually a great point of what we're seeing, both from a data and information availability to the operator, making the equipment easier to use, providing more detailed training content or work procedures. How does that impact an end customer's ability to deal with workforce challenges? Because we're seeing that in industry today, the turnover, the number of people coming in the door and out the door the next day. It's tough to keep a trained operator working on their equipment nonstop. And so how can we leverage these tools to make it easier for our customers to deal with that challenge? And we're seeing end users who are willing to pay for that, willing to pay subscriptions for on-demand trainings as needed, willing to pay a premium on equipment that makes it easier for those operators to use, makes it easier for the maintenance people to maintain them, since again, they're having the same experience with the maintenance teams. So identifying these challenges and solving them are really key fundamental ways that we can drive business at our customers.
Yeah, I'm seeing more OEMs equipment being delivered with, as far as errors and faults that happen to the equipment, more of a sequence, that the end user staff would just have to follow a sequence of events through their HMI or something that visually tells the operator what to do. So the training, because turnover is so high just about everywhere, especially at end users, the more information you can give them to make it easier to operate your equipment. So going back again to the design side, so I think it's a key both on the design side for new designs for equipment and also the revenue stream of the remote access. Yeah. Yeah, so there's next slide just shows how I mentioned earlier, kind of the real-time data that we have achieved from the digital transformation as far as increasing revenue and these new forms of revenue streams. It is a real increase in the amount of dollars.
It goes back to this idea of asking yourself the why, right? What do we want to achieve in implementing smart technologies and turning our machines into smarter, more data-rich solutions? What are we driving to accomplish? And what we're seeing is in making these shifts, leveraging these technologies can have significant impacts on the way we do business. I mean, you'll see, for example, there that reduced mean time to repair. 10 to 95% is a huge gap of what the impact could be. And the reality is we're looking at this across a maturity model that isn't always fair to show at one end. We may have customers who are already leveraging a lot of ways to reduce their mean time to repair. So if they're taking on AR as that next step, it may only have a small 10% impact because of all the other things that they're doing. But another OEM that may not have taken any of this data or information availability, any of the AR technologies or new technologies, there can be a fairly significant impact almost immediately of what these tools can do to things like mean time to repair, first-time fix rates, downtime. So really trying to take a holistic approach and look at how we can help improve the health of our machines in runtime.
Yeah, and I know we do have a slide later to kind of go over a little bit more of this in detail, but if you look at this on the very beginning stages of a new machine, possibly, you look at even the design tools that could help you get your equipment to market faster. That's an operational cost right there that you can save by getting your equipment out faster. You can make more machines. So there's tools that can help us do that as well.
And I think there's another big piece that we're really seeing on the services side is how many of our OEMs business, the majority of the business tends to actually even be on the aftermarket side. Right after we've sold the machine, all the services that we support our equipment with, parts, renewals, refurbishment contracts, all of that, can be impacted by how these tools can help either gain that market share, are customers coming back to us for the refurb and replacement, or are we losing that business? Do we even know if we're losing that business? So having the data and knowing when these kinds of things are happening can allow us to be more proactive in having our sales teams follow up with our customers about refurb jobs, follow up with our customers about consumable reorders. So if you're an OEM that, in a lot of cases, I've worked with some that focus, more or less on almost giving a machine away because the consumable business associated with that is so high, and they want to make sure that they can continue to win that business. Are they tracking how quickly a customer is running out? Do they know when the customer is going to be reordering more? Are they embedding ways to actually even just purchase a renewal on the operator's display so that they can eliminate the risk of a third-party consumable being brought in? So there's a whole variety of ways we can start to leverage these tools, this information to generate new revenue streams.
Yeah, and that goes back to the kind of the guarantee of performance. So I can guarantee this level of performance if you use the parts that we supply, and you can track that because they pretty much have to give you remote access for this guarantee to work.
So I think the other focus too is this idea of service cost and customer satisfaction. And what we're seeing is a fundamental shift in a lot of OEMs of moving from almost like an on-demand service model to an annual agreement, trying to generate renewals, trying to generate yearly revenue associated with service. That isn't just my machine broke down, somebody's going out to fix it, and we'll bill the customer for that time. How do we turn that into a annual subscription of we'll cover the machine, we'll do predictive maintenance, preventative maintenance, we'll provide remote support? What are the pieces that need to be included or incorporated that an end customer will see value in to say, we agree, we're willing to pay yearly for that? Is it, as we mentioned, those reports? Is it preventative maintenance schedules? Is it when I call, I get a hold of somebody? What we're trying to identify the ways that customers are willing to pay for that. And these are a couple examples of actual things that we're seeing in customers leveraging these tools and ways of moving forward. Of yes, in implementing these solutions, we saw an improvement to 92% first-time fix rate. That's a big one. Immensely impactful on our customer satisfaction. And so how does customer satisfaction translate to renewals for contracts, renewals for new orders if they're expanding or looking at new plants? Right? The impact of customer satisfaction on machine growth, on machine sales is immense and something that shouldn't be discounted.
Yeah, and I think just the visibility into how the equipment is running is immensely important to customer satisfaction, because they're going to know if the efficiency is going down, that the OEE's starting to go down, things we talked about in the last seminar. But if they see these numbers going down, they can try to find the resolution for why it's happening. And it's possible that the data that they're getting could also tell them why that they're getting that data, which goes back to that first time fix. Yeah, that one's huge right there, to know the root cause before you go in and start trying to fix this piece, that's not the root cause. That ends up with your downtime. And yeah, that one's immense right there.
Yeah, I mean, the first time fix rate's a big one, because I was working with an OEM that, 9 times out of 10, the gearbox was going to be the issue. And they knew this. They're working on designs to improve their gearbox and leverage a new one. But the technician would always show up with a gearbox because that was 9 times out of 10 the problem. They'd go in expecting to fix the gearbox. They weren't collecting any data. They just knew that. But that 10th time they go in that it was something else, it would take much longer to identify what the issue was, solve the problem. And they were looking for ways to try and help them identify, okay, when it's not the gearbox, how can we put information into our system so that we know what it is ahead of time, so that we don't have to have so many gearboxes in our inventory so that every one of our field engineers isn't driving around with a gearbox to swap out. So having a way of being able to be more efficient at that service piece instead of just saying, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be this. So we'll just be prepared to solve that. And if it's something else, we'll figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So optimizing that ability to support your customers and support customers can be pretty significant.
Yeah, I think the next bigger one from what we're seeing on this particular slide right here, the one I wanted to talk about was the faster response to issues. I know we have some vendors that provide equipment, so OEMs could do the same thing, but they will actually let the customer know that there's a problem before the customer even knows that there is a problem. So that's goes back to that customer satisfaction rate again. If you show up in the morning and you get an email or a text or something like that something is imminently wrong with the machine, or you need to replace this part, or there will be a predicted failure on this part in 2 months. Basically get those things kind of planned and know that that's happening before you even see it from an end user perspective.
Well, I go back again, and I'll reference as a field service engineer for Rockwell, the number of times that I get called at 4:30 on a Friday because the plant had been working on trying to resolve the issue all week. How would having that information, at time of failure as for an OEM say, maybe we'll give them a day to try and figure it out on their own, but if they're not, can we proactively reach out and offer help? Can we call them and say, hey, we see that you're having issues with this machine. Is there anything we can do to help? We have a technician in your area. We can send them out. I can send you over a quote, or we can deal with that part of it later. But could we get somebody out to you? And now we're talking about solving a problem on Tuesday or Wednesday, as opposed to trying to find somebody who could support it Friday night, Saturday. And
you mentioned replacement parts earlier too. So if you knew that the machine had this issue, you could go ahead and send the replacement part. Say, hey, you might need to replace this part. And if they don't need to replace that part, they send it back. But getting that predictive analysis could end up helping them a lot without having to determine it was that part, then go call and have to order that part and wait for it to ship in. You just go ahead and ship that part if it's determined that it needs that part.
No, it's a really good example too.
Mm-hmm. So I've mentioned a couple times that remote access is important. I think remote access is the key for a lot of the revenue stream generation that we've been talking about. So on the machine design side, obviously you don't need that remote access, and there's things that can be done to improve the efficiency and the OEE and the quality, all that on the design side. But when it comes to collecting all this data, having the remote access for support, it's really important that it is done securely, especially with everything that's going on now with hackers and ransomware and all that. It's really important that you don't just have any form of remote access. Like, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'll add too, and I think a lot of what we've seen done in the past has really been almost an ad hoc style of, I want remote connectivity, so I'm going to throw a device on. I'm not even going to tell my end user about it. We're seeing that become a point of friction, that IT groups tend to be frustrated with having the conversation because their responsibility is to protect their company, and opening ports or allowing access is a vulnerability. But if we can have the conversation around security and cybersecurity in an effective manner, we talk about the value add that these solutions can have, we're going to be much more successful in bringing everybody to the table. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to work with every customer and every customer is going to open up the doors to us, but it needs to be a conversation that both parties are involved.
Yep, that's what I was just going to say. That conversation needs to happen between IT at your end user and what's going on with the engineering staff. For instance, you're probably familiar with what just happened at a wastewater plant in Florida. Mm-hmm. What that was the operator, or I don't know who it was on the plant side, but they had TeamViewer, and then the OEM or integrator or whoever it was had remote access to the TeamViewer instance that was on their computer. That's how they got in. Mm-hmm. So that is a method of remote access, but that's not really the best method to do remote access. So I don't really want to get into the technical details, but just from a security perspective, I wanted to throw a couple just minor, real quick examples for this. The best way to do this is to have a conversation with the IT department and have a device on your equipment that's this UTM is just a unified threat management security. So it can be anything. And we have
firewall devices.
Yeah, we have all those things.
With management, it needs to be a holistic approach. It's not just we'll throw it on there.
Right. And the idea is the remote engineer or the remote support goes in through, this is saying a WAN router. So that could be another cellular device. There are ways to do that and do that securely. So if the customer does not want to allow you through their actual network, I would still get this approved by IT, let them know that this is the way that it's going. This is how security works in that method. But we might go through another method to get to the equipment. But once we do get to the equipment has security measures on it to prevent unwanted actions from occurring.
And I think this brings up a great point of differentiation as well, right? You and your customer or your competitor are all probably showing options that allow for remote connectivity, or we have the ability to have a connectivity device on our machine so we can remote in. But how many people are touting having, additional cybersecurity layers to prevent that access, right? Does this allow you to show to your customers, look, yes, we're putting real thought and effort into preventing remote access by unwanted users? And so it can be, and we are seeing it used as a way to say, I'm doing something different than my competitors. This is why you should consider me and this solution.
And that plays perfectly into the next example, which is talking with the IT department and actually getting their buy-in and showing them how your security plays into a system that is already there. So if you get a management appliance that can tie into their existing systems, get into their access list, or play in the same field with whatever they're using already, and that's where I think we could come in and help with that to make sure that it is done from a secure perspective using standard technology. Cisco and Rockwell have a partnership, so there's a lot of Cisco methods. So if you just mention that, a lot of times that'll get you an in with the IT departments and the security departments at your end users.
Well, and that's one of the biggest things that Rockwell's, we're making these investments for this digital future, because this is the direction business is going, industry is going. Through our partnerships with Microsoft, with PTC for our ability to deliver IoT and AR solutions, our partnerships with Cisco and Panduit, and the rest of the group that's involved in networks and infrastructure. The commitment Rockwell is making to this area of expertise is not insignificant. And, it is bringing the best, the brightest, the experience in industry, the experience in technology to these areas of focus. And so if it's an area that you need help with, or it's an area you want to investigate more, I strongly recommend reaching out to Dave here and the team at CBT to get some involvement with CBT and then Rockwell's group to help support your questions or your investigations.
Yeah, and just kind of go back to this example a little bit, why this is kind of the preferred method. If you see on this slide, you see a remote access server. That just gives the end user the ability to monitor what's going on. So if they know that you as an OEM need to come in and look at their equipment, they're going to see that traffic coming in through that remote access portal, and it's going to go into the remote access server. So you're going to authenticate into that. They're going to know that it was you that signed into there, and they can monitor it that way. So from an overall holistic approach, like you mentioned before, it's best to start that conversation with the IT department and not just put a device in there that's going to give you remote access that the end customer doesn't even know about. So.
The other thing I want to bring up is slightly off on a different topic, but still related to this idea of connectivity. a lot of the questions we're starting to get around remote connectivity and where the data lives is whose data is it?
Good point.
Is it the end users? Is it the OEMs? And if we can't define who it is, how are we allowed to make money off of that or create revenue streams? And it becomes a conversation of what data do you want to collect? Is it machine or motor current? And would an end user reasonably argue that motor current is proprietary information to them, or is that something as an OEM I have rights to because that's how I'm going to monitor my machine? So when you have these conversations with the end user about what we want to collect, we need to have the understanding ahead of time of what the data points we want to evaluate are. It needs to be a focused conversation that says, here's what I would want to collect, not just I want remote connectivity, here's what I want to collect and here's why. And the conversation is much more focused, much more prioritized of what we want. And those conversations go much more smoothly and effectively than starting with I want remote connectivity and we'll figure out what we need later.
Yeah, and to go along with that, that is a very good point that I want to mention from a security perspective is not only collecting that data and what to collect, but how long is it going to be stored? That's another security point, that data could be out there forever and someone could eventually go in and get a wealth of data if they can get the past 5 years worth of data. Whereas if you have a management program to kind of limit the time that data is stored, then that's going to depend on whether you need it for some kind of a reporting process to some other organization, or whether you just need it for your machine troubleshooting process. Is going to depend on how long you should store that data, which is another point that you should talk about when we're talking about data and sensors and collecting and storing that data. That's something that typically doesn't get talked about. It's typically, I want to log everything and I want to keep it forever. And that's not really the best option. So looking at that up front, like you mentioned, I think is a good point.
When that data collection brings us back to the idea of how do we turn this into revenue, and having that conversation with your end users, being able to say, this is the information we're going to collect for you, for your benefit. This is obviously the risk associated with collecting it for our, in our area, whether that's remotely, whether that's on machine, in the cloud, there's risk associated with that. So, we want you to pay for this service. We understand that there's risk associated with it. We'll take that risk on, and we feel that this is the right price from an annual agreement that we think you should be paying for it. And that's how we can approach having these conversations. And so, as we've kind of gone through this, we've really highlighted the potential that taking on these technologies, these use cases can have. Right? Is it reduction in unplanned downtime because we're collecting data and we can start to see when something might happen? Is it that reduction in maintenance costs because, again, we're seeing when things might happen, we're able to get the right people out to site sooner, we're able to get less service calls or on-site visits because we have the ability to troubleshoot and solve things remotely. What are the use cases we want to prioritize to try and solve these specific problems and start to leverage the tools to do that?
And I think it still goes back again to the point that we are making about OEE. I think it's a really important point that we talk about all the data and the downtime, but really what's important to the end user is they just want the machine to run.
Yep.
So OEE, I think, is the most important to them. So we can let them know what that number is at any point that they want to look at it and why that number is dipping. But yeah, I think if we can follow that aspect and kind of design the machine to be able to give that kind of data and be able to warn them, be able to direct them how to get it back on track, I think is going to be the biggest use case for having to possibly redesign a machine, but then getting the premium for that machine.
Well, and I think the OEE is a great example of what we can use the data for. The next step, I think, is the monetizing it, of getting this subscription to, as the OEM, monitor it. right? I know what to be looking for. If I just put the OEE number on my machine and my customer's seeing, okay, 90% I'm good today, 80% I'm down tomorrow, are they going to be able to,
know why that changed.
Are they going to be able to tell why that changed? Whereas as the OEM, I'm monitoring that and seeing, okay, my OEE is down to 80. What was the impact? Okay, it was due to downtime. Okay, let's go and look at what my downtime incidents were. Okay, third shift's hitting e-stop every time the cycle instead of cycle stop. Now I can make a recommendation to the customer to say, hey, we're monitoring your machine. Somebody's not using it right. You should improve your training. You should look at, giving this person training associated with how to run the machine. They might not dig that deep into it as an end user right off the bat, other than to say your machine's not performing adequately. But by monitoring it, we can proactively provide them feedback on how to better utilize our equipment.
Right.
So. And as we start to take on more and more of these solutions, we see more and more things moving to a digital space. And I think you mentioned this as we went from mechanical to electrical systems and automation, moving more and more from not converting things out of automation into digital, but creating this idea of a digital twin, digital thread can really allow us to start to see improvements, see ways of improving operations, maximizing productivity, being able to simulate what's actually happening with our equipment in a digital space really becomes that next industry 4.0 idea that we're starting to see a lot of people take on.
Yeah, being able to simulate a trend. Like a lot of times they'll ask what will happen if I try to increase my throughput by 5%. Mm-hmm. So if you have that as a digital twin, you can kind of, for lack of a better word, do the math and see what that increase in throughput is going to do to everything else on the machine. There may be some physical aspects that you're not aware of that's going to be damaging to the machine. So running that through a simulation could very well be able to optimize that.
How does that impact the life of our life expectancy of the equipment? Does it increase what we would expect for predictive or preventative maintenance calls? Being able to see if the throughput or the bandwidth is supported by increasing speed. You'd start to even be able to look at, for full systems, does one machine keep up with the throughput of our previous one, or should I have two? Right, being able to simulate
exactly.
if our designs are sound. Maybe I threw two robots on the end of a case packer to take off because I thought we'd be having enough cases come through, and really the degradation of throughput could have been handled by one, and adding a second one was just unnecessary cost. Or they get in the way. Maybe we find out in creating that prototype in the physical world, those robots can't collaborate together. There wasn't enough space, and we could have maybe caught that in the digital twin simulation of it that would have allowed us to alter the system. So I think there's a lot of ways to leverage these digital twins. Yeah,
and that could actually be an additional revenue stream. You mentioned to get that 5% throughput, you may have to supply another machine. Mm-hmm. That may be an option that you could show the customer through your digital twin, that if you want to get this throughput, this is what would happen if you try to get that throughput out of one machine. It's going to degrade your equipment life. It's going to do whatever you find from your simulation. But you say, this one, a new machine, while it might be a cost up front, is if you look at the total lifespan of the entire operation and you look at those operational costs, the maintenance costs, everything that would go along with more wear and tear on the one machine, and you could show them the actual cost comparisons between the two. So it could be a revenue stream just by being able to sell more equipment for the additional throughput in that example.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I kind of mentioned this before with some products that Rockwell has to allow you to kind of speed up the design process. Specifically, I wanted to use this slide and talk about a couple of the free products from Rockwell on the design side, like Motion Analyzer, IAB, which is Integrated Architecture Builder, and Proposal Works. These are just helpful design tools that will allow you to create a bill of material, make sure that everything works from a hardware perspective, and even start the beginning levels of the code for you. There's code libraries that you can import into Logix programs, basically get your machine 60-70% of the way done.
And it goes to the digital thread is really trying to take as much of your machine or your equipment's life cycle and pull it into the digital space. So whether that's prototyping, designing, commissioning, through to operate and maintain. Rockwell has a host of solutions that can allow you to bring in digital aspects of your equipment across the entire life cycle of that machine. So as you mentioned, starting in the design and proposal phase with things like Proposal Works or Integrated Architecture Builder, building out a digital twin with CAD models or something like an Emulate 3D to leverage design tools. All of these things can then be incorporated into how this machine is represented across the entirety of the system. So,
and across the entire life of the
yes,
system
exactly.
is an important part.
Yeah. So definitely, if you have questions, to reach out and we can work and help understand where and how you look to leverage these kinds of tools.
For sure. And I think these slides are offered as part of this presentation. So if you have any questions about any of these offerings, definitely please set up a meeting with myself, and I can get anyone else involved if necessary.
And so we wanted to come back to this slide to kind of reinforce as you think about these ideas of what to do, it really needs to be, why am I implementing something like this? So what is the benefit? This becomes the how do I achieve that? And then the previous slide with the solutions becomes the what, right? Why am I doing this? How do I do it? And then what solves that problem? Mm-hmm. And so if we can approach these challenges, these asks that our customers are making of us, we can really be much more successful in implementing these technologies and solutions.
And so I'm not sure if there were any questions that came through, but if you do have any questions, there is the ability to book a meeting with myself directly from this seminar, or you can email me, call me. We have all of our contact information in the information section of this. We're definitely willing to give you a hand specifically with the why and the how to determine what is the ask, and then why and how do we achieve that.
Yeah, and we're happy to talk about it. I appreciate everybody's attention through the course of these webinars. We've been really excited to be able to put them on. If you have any questions, please let us know. We're happy to help.
Thank you very much.